Hello and welcome to BitThink with me, Christina, although today it might actually be a bit more of a crypto-yak. Okay, today I want to talk about the virtue of virtual portfolios and the importance that citation or acknowledgement of your sources has. Okay, so let's say that you've transferred some of your fiat into Bitcoin. You can have done this quite a long time ago. You can have done this 5 minutes ago. But I think every person who moves some fiat into Bitcoin is then confronted with the question, now what? What next? Shall I just hodl? Or shall I do something that is akin to diversification? And if I diversify, how should I think about diversification? So one powerful voice on the subject of diversification, and specifically with regards to how the Bitcoin forks function as a form of diversification, is Daniel. And he speaks quite eloquently about the reasons why investors should not be afraid of forks. And he also has a fairly well-developed opinion regarding the idea that the altcoins are the alternative tokens and coins that you see on CoinMarketCap are not necessarily the best form of diversification. You also have a strong, articulate voice in the space here with Mr. Tone Bays, who quite summarily refers to the altcoins as shitcoins, which I encourage everybody to really take the time to listen to what he has to say, because he has a lot of reasonable and cogent points as to why you would not choose to diversify into the altcoin space. And then you have voices on the other side of the discussion. Michael over at Superman is definitely a really common sense, grounded, intelligent voice with regards to why you would want to diversify into the altcoin markets, how to think about choosing various altcoins, how to think about denominating in Bitcoin versus denominating in fiat. And so if one were going to go looking for a place to start, you wouldn't be in any way failing yourself if you started off with Superman. But regardless of whichever sort of way of thinking about investing or risk, or even your own understanding of what diversification means, maybe Bitcoin itself is a diversification within a portfolio that has equities, bonds, cash, gold, whatever other forms of diversification people have. I'm here to talk about the virtue of starting off with some form of virtual portfolio. And this is just an image that I picked from a range of images that can give you an idea that before you get into deciding what to actually do with your Bitcoin, you should take the time to learn the markets and to learn your own thought processes by constructing and following properly a virtual portfolio. And this learning process can be as short as a week. I think it's wise to get through an entire weekend cycle, see what kind of patterns emerge with, global markets and weekends and so on. But I would suggest that before you go into any coin or any set of decisions, or you even decide to take your Bitcoin and put it on your Trezor or your Nano and put it in the safe, you teach yourself both about the markets and about your own self. So in my journey, I have found a really useful article, which it's driving me nuts. I cannot find the citation. I'm continuing to look for it, and as soon as I do, I will post it. But one of the most influential expressions that I have come across is understanding that the really revolutionary value proposition of Bitcoin and any of the other alt crypto projects that are emerging is in the areas in which activities or expressions are most vulnerable to censorship or control. The areas of human economic or social activity that have been historically or are structurally vulnerable to censorship forms of control are the ones in which decentralized blockchain ledger technology and the kind of mental emotional shifts that are necessary amongst a significantly large enough group of people to create the necessary network, those are the areas in which I personally think that there are projects that will have enough benefit as to justify sitting on the end of censorship resistance here in the seesaw at the cost of speed and efficiency, which centralization inevitably brings. I think it's worth pointing out that I am in accordance with those voices in the space. Krista Rose is one that comes to mind, who point out that we can't just be reflexive in a kind of Animal Farm-like decentralization good, centralization bad. I think that that's just another example of a type of fundamentalist thinking. And so really what we should be doing is making sure that the benefits of decentralization are applied first and foremost to the areas that most need it. And this is a kind of meta framework that I have had in place as I have gone looking and educating myself and making decisions for a virtual portfolio as I look to see which projects there are that are of most interest to me. I do want to repeat that I'm going to hunt down the citation for the article that got me thinking like this. And I do want to take a moment here to digress to talk about the importance of acknowledgement, footnoting, citation, or in a more general sense, shouting out those people who contribute to anyone's own personal sort of intellectual stimulation or thought process. And so I want to talk a little bit about imitation and memes. So to my mind, there is no shame in being impressed by something or someone enough to want to imitate or copy them, whether that's in style or in content. The human capacity to imitate is the very basis for our species' success because it is what enables us cognitively and technologically to create memes which reproduce as effectively, if not more effectively, than actual DNA genes. I mean, of course, the leading author in this field is Dawkins, and he coined the phrase meme. So the idea of pure originality, which is most recently been expressed as in the romantic capital R movement of the tortured original artist, the idea of pure originality is extremely powerful, but it is actually so rare as to be mythical. The French literary critic Roland Barthes captured this in his essay, The Death of the Author, when he describes any piece of literature as always being a tissue of quotations from others. So these types of insights, memes, tissues of quotations, etc., are for sure an essential way of understanding the postmodernist framework. And so to be inspired to copy or imitate and mash up other people's work is not shameful. It's actually pure human intelligence in operation. However, to do so without acknowledgement, to do so without citing your sources is problematic. Aside from anything else, it undermines the authority of one's voice. I mean, perhaps counterintuitively, acknowledging others increases the legitimacy of yourself. And this is entirely true when one imitates in a way which is also a form of competition. So this brings me back to one of my new favorite words, thank you Fork Monster, which is co-opetition. And I've been reflecting on how this is actually a far more productive form of social interaction than straightforward competition or just straightforward cooperation, because it actually recognizes the fact that we are all sort of playing a board game with each other, but that we all have to cooperate enough to sit and come up with functional rules and a desire to play the game in the first place. So in the context of the rapidly evolving CryptoTube, YouTube, TV space, which I think has, in addition to Twitter and then digitally printed media, a significant influence on new people coming into the space and people in the space already. I did want to reflect on the fact that for someone who works from home and sort of runs YouTube in the background like my parents used to run the radio, it's become clear that there are two definitive camps of contributors to the space. Those that acknowledge, shout out, are in some kind of co-opetition with other broadcasters, and those that just simply don't acknowledge. So, it's totally understandable that there are other broadcasters in the space that are inspired by their collaborators, and it's totally okay to be inspired, to be moved to imitate and grow your own work. But it is really important to acknowledge who and where you're getting your ideas from. And so in that context, I wanted to absolutely shout out Mr. Dan from They Call Me Dan with regards to how I'm going to build on the first part of this broadcast today, which was my own personal interest in projects that are specifically geared towards areas that are vulnerable to censorship resistance. And I want to build on some of the ideas that I've gotten from Dan about how to think about investing as a form of nest egging and trading as a form of wealth building. So Dan is very clear on the difference between trading and nest egging, which are some of the same things that Superman talks in terms of strong handing and so on. Dan differentiates between picking coins to purely trade with in order to increase your Bitcoin holding. And in that context, you're looking for coins that clearly have lids and have a range of volatility that you can reasonably project. He points out that an understanding of or a feeling for a project is not particularly important in this context. So it might be the case, for example, speaking for myself, I don't have a very strong feeling for the Internet of Things. I'm sort of more interested in making sure we get internet to all the people. So IOTA is, for example, not something that I have a particularly strong feeling for, but has over the past months or so been a really interesting coin to practice with in the virtual portfolio, the art of seeking the 3 to 5% compounding gain in order to increase BTC holdings. And I would suggest that it's actually better to try and trade with things that you don't have any kind of emotional attachment to, because you can be far more dispassionate about simply setting your buy and your stop and work on the somewhat unsexy exercise of compounding at 1, 2, 3% on a regular basis. So on the other hand, Dan is definitely an extremely powerful, articulate voice for how you should go about creating nest eggs or long-term investments, or things for which you're going to have a strong hand. And he speaks very clearly about getting involved in projects that you personally have a feel for, that you understand, that you have some passion for, that aligns with your analog life, that will motivate you to actually do enough research and pay enough attention, and as Superman advocates, definitely use the things that you're investing in long term. This is a very old kind of insight. Graham said, invest in the things that you use. And in a crypto decentralized context, simply by participating, you're actually creating and maintaining the value proposition of any of the projects that you might feel really capture your imagination. So I think that when you come to get to construct a virtual portfolio, one of the things that you're discovering is, in fact, which things you really care about and which things you're really interested in for the math compounding capacity. So in my case, my virtual portfolio does not look like this. It has substratum, it has ClearPoll. I'm looking into loci. I will probably do a post on my own personal thoughts about virtual portfolio. But for the purpose of this video, it's really the idea being that before you decide whether or not you think all coins are to be avoided or they're to be invested in, whether or not you're a straightforward hodler or you're slightly diversified in other cash, you really should run some virtual portfolios so that you learn how you feel and how it works, and so you are able to decide for yourself.